Hello. So this video is to help you understand how to merge two different codes. Ideally, eventually you'll understand how to read it so that you can just write it yourself, but obviously like we're still learning. So this is a good strategy for when you're first kind of getting into it. I'm going to try to get a notebook file. All right, so I just want to kind of go over the structure of code, and I'm going to open up this and kind of do it side by side. So there's the stuff at the top. So there's top. Then we have the stuff in setup. We have loop. And then we have the bottom. Really bad at doing this. I'll just use glue. Right. So in the top above setup here, boom, boom, boom. Up here, that's typically where variables go. There's code libraries. That's code that other people have written that we can borrow from them. And when I say variables, I mean global variables that can be used by any function in the code. Setup is where code that happens once. So either it's setup code that only needs to happen once, like when we define pin numbers, or pin mode, etc. So if we define the pins, we usually do that in setup because we only need to do that one time. Also, like if you only wanted it to repeat one time, you put it in setup. When you want the code to continuously check a value or do the same thing over and over, oh my gosh, then you would put it in loop. All right. In loop is the code that repeats, and this is kind of like the bulk of your program. So most of what's happening in your program is going to happen in loop. At the bottom is where we can define functions. Oh. So down here. So if we write a function or we borrow a function is either code we've written ourselves that we're going to access, or it's code that we borrowed that we want to access. So function and setup and loop are functions, and there's other functions that could go at the bottom after loop. It doesn't necessarily matter where you put it. I just think it's easier to find them if they're after loop. All right, so let's get started on this process of if I have two codes, I want to combine their tops, their setups, their loops, and their bottoms. Okay, so I'm going to put some code side by side. The first code I'm going to choose is the blank example code. So you just click on those bars, and this is kind of our traditional LED code. Then I'm going to duplicate my screen and put it side by side. But before I do that, I actually put as a resource in both my electronics, robotics, and my advanced product classes, the input extravaganza activity. And when we go into the document, what I have done here is I have sample code and wiring for these different parts: push button, switch, motion sensor, potentiometer, which is the knob, and the light sensor. So if you want to borrow my code and wiring, these examples work. I'm going to start with the motion sensor. And when I go to the motion sensor, what I can do is I push tinker this. Actually, I'm going to do button. Never mind. Let me do button. Just because the button has blocks in. Tinker this. All right. So let's say I want to do a button and I want the button to turn the light on. Okay. So when I click code, I actually did it in block code. Isn't that cool? So you can do block code in Tinkercad, but I can actually go to blocks and text, and it gives me the code that I can copy and paste into Tinkercad. Wow. So now I have a button. All that's happening here is I'm defining a variable to store the value of the button at the beginning. I say there's a button at pin 2, and then I'm in the loop continuously reading the button at pin 2 and storing that value in button state. So if I want to do anything with button state, with the button, this is the word that is important, the button state, because that's where I'm reading the pin, and loop just keeps reading and reading and reading. I could check the serial monitor and see what is happening at button state. And now I'm going to just close, or wait, let me see. Do I have, I'm going to open up my code bender from the LED, and I have this one. So I'm going to do side-by-side screen of these two codes, and we're going to put them together. Okay? All of this is just a bunch of, the green writing with the slashes are comments. So like, if these are useful to me, I could keep them. I'm just going to delete them because comments are just like what you write to make you understand the code. Read it before you delete it just to make sure like maybe you want to keep that on. So right here, this is my LED where my LED is. So whatever pin my LED is at, I would want this number to match that on my wiring. This is a variable that I've created for the button state. I'm going to move that over because this is at the beginning above setup, and I'm going to delete this. And this is what I want to happen before we get into the setup loop, or setup function, sorry, setup function. So now that's the stuff at the top, right? So I have the top, I have my global variables. I've also defined a variable to store the value of the button. And I could also, which I would recommend, create a variable to store the value of the button pin, which we did not do. So maybe I'll do that at the end. So now inside of setup, I have pin mode LED output. So that's setting pin 13 as an output because that's where my LED is, right? Because LED is 13. So I'm setting pin 13 as an output where my LED is. And then I'm going to bring over these two pieces. Enter. Okay. Notice when I moved it over, it kind of joined this line. If I did that, it wouldn't work because this is part of the comment. So I needed to make a new line. And so now I have my button, I have my LED, I have an input and an output, right? My input is a button, my output is an LED. When I push my button, the light will turn on when I tell it to. I'm not ready for that yet. And then this is serial begin is using the serial monitor. So that's what this line does here. I don't have to have that, but I could keep it. It's not going to kill anything. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make new lines, and I'm going to have in between these curly brackets of loop some space here, and I'm going to paste over my loop from the other function. And notice now everything is gone from this code, so I'm done with that. So now they're merged. Yay! And at this point, I have a variable storing the state of the button, meaning is it being pressed or not? Right? So that's this line here. So if I want to do an if statement, and this is what we had done in, if you wanted to kind of look at that, it would be in spaceship interface. This assignment, the code for this assignment, we did, and I think it's here, an if statement. Oh no, it's not here. Where did I put that? Maybe it's in here. So I will make this code easier to find, but it's actually in the spaceship interface slides right here. And it's a code that you can download for the if statement. So if you want more help with that, I'll put this code as a material in that assignment so that you can access it and just check it out. It has buttons being pressed and lights flashing. So it's just kind of a good if statement example, but I'm just going to write it from scratch here, and you're welcome to use it from this. So first, I'm going to read my button, and I'm going to print the value to the serial monitor. If my button wasn't working, I could check the serial monitor and like see if it's working. Now I'm going to write if, and then in the parentheses is my condition. If button state is exactly equal to 1. And I have to do the double equal sign, otherwise it will make button state 1. I don't want to like assign a value of 1 to button state. I want to check. This means I'm going to check button state, and when it's 1, meaning the button is pressed, then I'm going to do some stuff. And what I want to happen is I want my light to blink 1 time. All right? And otherwise, I want my light to turn off. So I'm going to copy this. So I'm going to delete, well, and I could make it blink multiple times. I can make it blink faster, whatever. It's just going to blink 1 time. And then when the button is pressed. So it's going to blink when the button's pressed. When I let go of the button, it will stop blinking. And I could compile, or I'll run this code. Okay, so I didn't have any errors in it. I'm going to pause the video and do this in Tinkercad real quick. So to show you guys how this works, what I did is I actually created the simulation in Tinkercad. I added an LED, I have a button, I pasted my code into the code here. So this is the same code that I had in CodeBender. And see, I can show you when I start the simulation, right? Start simulation. If I press the button, my LED blinks, and it's not blinking very fast. So I think I'm going to change it to something faster just to make it more obvious. Stop simulation. But you can actually write your code and design your circuit in Tinkercad first, if that's easier. I think it's kind of cool. Start. All right, so now it should blink faster. All right, so when I press my button, it blinks fast. When I stop pressing, it turns off, and that's what I wanted it to do. If button is pressed, blink, otherwise off. And this can be applied to any other sensors. Not all of them are as simple as a button. Okay, so you may have a little bit more code. If there's parts of the new code that you don't know how to use, let me know. And I'm going to do a different video on like, what if I needed a sensor that I've never used before? Okay, so you can Google, basically, I'll just show you real quick. If I Google like ping or ultrasonic sensor, if I Google it, I can find some different tutorials, right? And I should go around and if I would want to find one that gives me a wiring diagram. See, so this has like, and then that gives me the whole list of code. So here, look at that. It gives me the whole code. And all I would do is let me zoom in on this. I would copy over the things before setup, the things inside setup into the setup function, and the things inside loop into the loop function. Okay. And that's true. I mean, pretty much any component you would ever want to use, you'll be able to find code just like this with a wiring diagram and everything. I believe somewhere around here, here we go. See, wiring diagram. So I hope this helps. Good luck. You got this. And let me know if you have questions. Bye.